Nobody in that store knew they were being watched. Nobody knew the test had already started. And nobody, not one person, suspected that the trembling old man shuffling through the front door was about to destroy their careers or save one. He moved slow, too slow. His coat was 2 sizes too big, gray and stained at the collar, the kind of coat that made people look away fast. His boots were scuffed past saving. His face was buried under a heavy beard, white at the edges, tangled in the middle. He kept his chin down and his shoulders folded inward like a man the world had already finished with. His name was Garrett Owens, and he owned every single thing inside that building. Garrett hadn't always been this way. Not the disguise, the need for it. 3 years ago, he'd walked these same floors in a tailored suit, shaking hands, cutting ribbons, watching cameras flash. His face had been on magazine covers. His company, a national retail chain with over 200 locations, had been called one of the greatest American business success stories of the decade. Then the emails started coming in. Not to his board, not to PR. Directly to him. Anonymous messages from customers describing how they'd been treated in his stores. Mocked, dismissed, made to feel invisible. One message from an elderly man in Ohio had stayed with Garrett for 6 months. They looked at me like I was something they needed to clean off their shoe. Garrett had ordered internal reviews, investigations, retraining programs. Nothing changed. So tonight, 1 hour before closing, he walked into location 47 in his old coat and his fake beard, with shaking hands and downcast eyes, to find out the truth himself. The store was quiet at this hour. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. 2 workers stood behind the main service counter. A young man named Drew and another named Topher, both leaning against the back shelf, phones half raised, looking like they were waiting for the shift to be over. At the far end of the counter stood a girl working alone. Her name tag said Brianna. She was maybe 22, 23 at most. Her natural hair was pulled back. There were tired circles under her eyes that spoke of double shifts and too much coffee. But her posture was straight and she was actually doing her job, reorganizing a display case, focused, moving with quiet purpose in a way the other 2 clearly weren't. Garrett shuffled toward the counter. Drew noticed him first. His eyes moved from his phone to the old man's coat and stopped there. He said nothing. He just leaned slightly toward Topher and tilted his head. Topher looked up, and something ugly crossed his face. Quick but visible. Garrett kept moving. His voice came out thin and rough when he reached the counter. "Excuse me, could I trouble you for a cup of water? My throat's been real dry." Drew and Topher didn't move. Brianna looked up from the display case. She didn't hesitate. She didn't make a face. She just said, "Of course," and turned toward the back. Behind her, Topher let out a short breath. Not quite a laugh, but not far from one. Drew picked up his phone again. Garrett watched everything. Brianna brought the water in a clean cup, not a paper cone from the dispenser, but a proper cup, filled to the top. She set it on the counter and pushed it toward him carefully, making sure it wouldn't tip. "Take your time," she said. Garrett reached for the cup. His hands were shaking. That part wasn't fake anymore. He wasn't sure when the performance had started bleeding into something real, but it had. He drank slowly. Behind Brianna, Drew was talking in a low voice to Topher, but not low enough. "How long is this gonna take?" Topher snorted. "Should have just said we were out." The words were soft. Garrett caught every syllable. He set the cup down carefully and said, in his weakest voice, "Thank you, miss. That was very kind." Brianna nodded. "You need anything else?" He paused. This was the next part of the test. "I don't suppose," he started slowly, "there's any small thing I could help with. Sweeping, carrying boxes, anything. I haven't eaten since morning, and I was hoping maybe—" He didn't finish the sentence. Drew cut across the store floor, moving now, his voice sharp and low. Hey, man, I'm gonna have to ask you to move along. You're blocking the counter and we've got actual customers coming in." There were no other customers. The store was empty. Garrett looked down at the floor, nodded slowly, started to turn. "He's fine." Brianna's voice was quiet, but it stopped the room cold. Drew looked at her. Bree. He's fine, she said again, not louder, just clearer. He asked a question. That's not blocking anything. A beat of silence. Drew walked back. But his face had changed. Something in it had hardened. Garrett stood very still. Brianna looked at him. She looked at his hands, his coat, his eyes. She seemed to be making a decision that the rules on the backroom bulletin board hadn't covered. There's a small stock room around back, she said quietly. Some boxes came in today that need to be broken down. If you can manage that, I can put something together for you to eat. Topher made a noise. Drew looked at the ceiling. Garrett nodded. I can manage it. He worked for 20 minutes. The boxes were heavy enough that his arms genuinely ached by the end. He broke them down one by one, stacked them flat, tied them with the cord that had been left on the shelf. He moved slowly, but he moved completely, and when he came back out, the job was done right. Brianna was waiting. She had wrapped a sandwich and a bottle of juice in a paper bag. Not scraps, not whatever was about to expire, but something she had gone to the food section and selected herself. She held it out to him. You earned it, she said simply. Behind her, Topher had drifted closer. His voice came out low, meant for Brianna but loud enough that Garrett could hear. You know you can get written up for this, right? Store items without a purchase receipt? Manager finds out and it's your job. Brianna didn't answer him. She kept her eyes on Garrett and held the bag steady until he took it. He took it. His hands were no longer shaking. Not from the performance. Not from age. But from something in his chest that had gone very, very quiet. He looked at her face one more time. She knows the risk, he thought. She knows exactly what it could cost her, and she's doing it anyway. He turned toward the door. He took 4 steps. Then he stopped. Something happened in that 4-step pause that Garrett hadn't planned for. He had run this kind of test before, twice at other locations years ago. He'd gone in disguised, watched how his staff behaved, taken notes, made changes. It had always felt controlled, strategic, professional. This time it didn't feel like that. This time he stood near the exit of a fluorescent-lit store at 9:40 at night, holding a paper bag that a 20-something woman had packed for him knowing it could get her fired, and something in his chest was doing something he hadn't budgeted for. He thought about his own mother. She'd worked in a store like this one. 3rd shift. Sore feet. Never complained. She'd once given her lunch to a man outside who said he was hungry, and she'd gone the rest of that shift on black coffee and crackers from her purse. He hadn't thought about her in years. He reached up slowly, pulled off his cap. Then, with both hands, he peeled away the beard. The sound Topher made wasn't words. It was just air. Like something had hit him in the stomach and pushed it all out. Drew dropped his phone. Brianna went completely still. Garrett Owens turned around and faced the 3 of them with a clean, sharp face and calm eyes. He looked nothing like the man who had shuffled through the door 90 minutes ago. He stood straight. His voice, when he spoke, was low and even, and it carried across the entire empty store like a sound system being turned on. My name is Garrett Owens. I own this company. Nobody spoke. The silence wasn't dramatic. It was just silence. The kind that comes when a room full of people suddenly understand that every word they have said in the last hour and a half has been heard, measured, and remembered. Drew's face went the color of dry concrete. Topher took a small step backward. His mouth opened, then shut, then opened again with nothing coming out. Brianna hadn't moved. Her hands were still at her sides. Her eyes were locked on Garrett's face, not with guilt. She didn't have any, but with a stunned, searching expression, like someone trying to recalibrate something they couldn't quite reach. Garrett looked at her. Then he looked at the other 2. He let the quiet sit for a long time. I came in tonight, he said finally, because I've been getting messages from customers for 2 years, telling me how they feel when they walk out of my stores. He paused. Tonight I felt it myself. Drew opened his mouth. Garrett held up one hand. Don't. He didn't say it loud. He said it the way a man says something when he means it absolutely and doesn't need volume to prove it. There is nothing you can say right now that changes what I saw, what I heard. He turned his eyes to Drew. You told a man in need to move along. There were no other customers. There was no reason. He looked at Topher. You warned a young woman that doing the right thing was going to cost her job. And you hoped that would stop her. Neither of them looked up from the floor. It didn't stop her. Garrett turned back to Brianna. She was still watching him. There was something in her expression now that was close to tears but hadn't gotten there. Like she was holding it back through pure stubbornness. You gave me water, he said. You defended me when you didn't have to. You gave me work because you understood that dignity matters more than policy. And you packed that bag knowing exactly what it could cost you. He stopped. You were willing to lose your job to do the right thing for a stranger. He stepped closer. That's not something I can ignore. He was quiet for a moment. Just one moment. Still, almost gentle. And then he straightened up and the weight of everything he'd decided came through clearly in his voice. He told Drew and Topher they would be on a mandatory performance review effective immediately. He told them the review would be thorough. He told them what he expected from anyone who wore his company's name on their shirt. And he told them simply and without cruelty that the behavior he'd witnessed tonight was not something he had built this company to represent. Then he turned to Brianna. I'm creating a district oversight position. It's a role I've needed to fill for 2 years and haven't found the right person for. He looked at her directly. I want someone who already knows what it looks like when a location is failing its customers. Someone who won't look the other way. He paused. Someone who can't be warned off doing the right thing. Brianna blinked. You'd be moving up 5 levels, Garrett said. Salary, benefits, and a direct line to my office. You'd oversee 6 locations in this region. He looked at her carefully. I know you don't know me. I know this is sudden. But I watched you tonight for 90 minutes and I think I know enough. She was quiet for a long moment. Her voice came out small when she finally spoke, but steady. I wasn't doing it to get anything. I know, Garrett said. That's why I'm offering it. She accepted. Not right away. She asked a question, one question, quiet and serious, about whether the people she'd be overseeing would be treated fairly even when they were struggling. Whether they'd have a real chance to improve. Garrett looked at her for a moment. Then he said yes. And he meant it. Drew and Topher stood near the back of the store while Garrett and Brianna exchanged contact information. Neither of them spoke. The store hummed around them. The lights didn't know anything had changed. But something had. Later that night, alone in his car in the parking lot, Garrett sat for a few minutes before starting the engine. He held the paper bag. He hadn't put it down since she'd handed it to him. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because it was the first time in a long time that someone had handed him something with no idea what he was worth. No idea who he was. No angle. No performance. Just a sandwich and some juice and a woman who decided that a person in need was worth the risk. He thought about his mother again. About the crackers and the black coffee and the man outside who'd gotten her lunch. She'd never found out what happened to that man. She never knew if he'd been okay. She'd done it anyway. Some things, she used to say, you do because they're right. Not because anyone's watching. Garrett set the bag on the passenger seat. Started the car. Drove home through the quiet dark. And somewhere on the highway, alone at midnight, the most powerful man in the building started crying. Not from sadness, not from guilt, but from something rarer than either.